Welcome to Ambient Myths, a calm, research-led mythology story made for relaxation and sleep. Tonight, we're looking at three ancient stories about figures who appear at the edge of things. Baba Yaga in the Slavic forest, the Sphinx outside the gates of Thebes, and Baucis and Philemon, an elderly Phrygian couple whose hospitality was tested by gods in disguise. Three different traditions, and yet the same pattern keeps returning at the boundary between safety and the unknown. Our story begins in a dark forest, where a young girl is walking toward the edge of everything she knows. There is a fence in this story, and every post in it is a human bone. A girl is walking toward it. Her name is Vasilisa, and her mother has been dead since Vasilisa was 8 years old. Dead of a sickness no doctor could name. Before she died, she called her daughter to her bedside and gave her a small doll. "Keep her with you always," she said. "Show her to no one, and when trouble finds you, feed her and ask for her help." Vasilisa's father remarried. The new wife brought 2 daughters of her own, close to Vasilisa in age, and despised her stepdaughter from the start. For being lovelier, for being kinder, for being infuriatingly no worse off for any of the cruelty aimed at her. The stepsisters piled their own chores onto her. Somehow, she was never worn down by it. Whatever she was protected by, it worked. Her father left on a long trip for business. While he was gone, the stepmother moved the household to a smaller house, right at the edge of a dark forest. And somewhere in that forest stood a hut where an old woman lived who was said to eat anyone who found her, the way a person might eat a chicken. One evening, the stepmother set the 3 girls to work by candlelight. Lace for one stepsister, knitting for the other, spinning for Vasilisa. And left for the night, first warning them, if the candle goes out, someone will have to walk into that forest for a new light. The candle goes out. The stepsisters refuse outright. One says she'll finish by the glow of her knitting needles. The other says the same of her pins. Neither will go. So between them, they push Vasilisa out the door and bolt it behind her. She has the doll in her pocket. "Go wherever you're sent," it tells her. "Fear nothing. As long as you carry me, you're safe." She walks into the forest. A rider in white passes her, and everything around her turns white. A rider in red passes, and everything turns red. A rider in black passes, and the world goes black around her, and she has no idea, none at all, what she's just seen. She only knows to keep walking. And then she reaches the fence. It is built of human bones, and on top of it sits a row of human skulls, each one lit from inside, throwing a dim light onto the path. The gate itself is worse. The hinges are made of human legs, and where a lock should be, there are human hands. She does not run. She has nowhere else to go, and the candle is already out at home. A noise comes from above, a shriek of wind and wood, and a woman rides down out of the sky in a mortar, rowing herself through the air with a pestle. "Fie, fie," the old woman says, landing. "I smell the blood of a Russian. Who is here?" We are going to leave Vasilisa standing there in front of a woman who has just announced she can smell her, because that is exactly where this episode needs to begin. Not with who Baba Yaga is, with the fence. With the question every culture on this earth has asked in one form or another. What waits at the edge of the world we know, and what does it cost to be let past it? If you know one thing about Baba Yaga, it's probably this. She's a witch who eats children. That's the version that survives in the popular imagination. A Slavic boogeyman interchangeable with any other forest hag from any other cautionary tale. That version is not wrong exactly. It's just thin. It's the flattened tourist brochure summary of a figure who is one of the strangest, most contradictory beings in world folklore, and the strangeness is the entire point. Here is the first thing the actual old tales tell you, the ones collected by 19th century folklorists like Alexander Afanasyev, directly from Russian and Slavic oral tradition. Baba Yaga is not reliably a villain. In some stories, she eats the hero. In others, like Vasilisa's, she tests the hero, and if they pass the test, she helps them. Sometimes she does both to different people in the same tale. The scholar Andreas Johns spent an entire book working through this, called Baba Yaga, the ambiguous mother and witch of the Russian folk tale. Johns went through the whole surviving body of tales and sorted her roles into 3 categories folklorists use for this kind of figure. Dona, meaning she gives the hero a gift or tool they need to succeed. Ambiguous donor, meaning she might help or might kill depending on how the encounter goes. And villain, meaning this time she's simply the threat, the same figure doing 3 different jobs depending on which story you're standing inside. That's not narrative inconsistency. That's the character working as designed. Baba Yaga isn't good or evil, she's a test. And whether you survive her has almost nothing to do with strength and almost everything to do with whether you already know how to behave when you reach her. Look at what actually happens once Vasilisa steps through that gate. Baba Yaga doesn't kill her on sight and doesn't help her either. She puts her to work, and the terms are simple. Succeed, and you'll be fed and sent home with fire. Fail, and there's already room on the fence for one more skull. The first task is to fetch out everything sitting in the stove and set it on the table because, in the old woman's own words, she's as hungry as a wolf. What's in the stove, the story makes a point of telling us, is chiefly human flesh. Vasilisa serves it without protest. The second day's task is harder to explain away as a simple chore. Clean the entire yard, sweep the whole hut, cook the dinner, and peel 100 pounds of potatoes, all before Baba Yaga returns from wherever her mortar takes her. An impossible amount of work for one girl in one day. But Vasilisa isn't really doing it alone. The doll in her pocket finishes everything while she sleeps, and every morning the work is simply done. On the second night, standing silently while Baba Yaga eats, Vasilisa is asked why she looks troubled. She says she has questions about the white, red, and black riders she passed on the way in. Baba Yaga answers plainly, day, sunset, night. Then she warns Vasilisa, half joking, not to ask too much, or you will soon get old. Vasilisa has more questions. She has seen things inside this house she doesn't understand either, and chooses deliberately not to ask them. That restraint is what changes the encounter. Baba Yaga, impressed, turns a question back on her. Why is she so obedient, so capable, never once making a mistake? Vasilisa answers honestly. She supposes it is her dead mother's blessing helping her. And Baba Yaga's reaction isn't rage, it's refusal. I don't want any blessedness in my hut, she says, and sends Vasilisa home that same hour with one of the lit skulls from the fence to carry as a lamp. That skull kills the stepmother and stepsisters when Vasilisa brings it home. So in one telling, Baba Yaga is simultaneously the thing that could have killed Vasilisa, the thing that tested her fairly, the thing that gave her the tool of her own survival, and the indirect cause of her tormentor's destruction. Villain, tester, and donor in the same 20 minutes of story. Why does a culture build a figure like that? Start with the house itself, because the house is doing more work in this story than most listeners register on a first pass. It has no door until you speak the correct words to it. It stands on legs and turns to face you, or refuses to. It sits at the edge of the forest, which in the geography of these tales is not simply trees. The forest is the boundary of the known world. Past the tree line is where the dead live, where the old gods that predate whatever religion currently sits on top of the culture still linger, where the rules of the village no longer apply. The folklorist Vladimir Prop the same scholar who built the foundational structural analysis of the fairy tale that's still used today, devoted an entire study to exactly this question in a book usually translated as The Historical Roots of the Wonder Tale. Propp's argument, built from comparing these tales against the actual initiation rituals of pre-agricultural societies, is that Baba Yaga's hut is a folk memory of something real. Forest initiation huts, where young people in certain cultures were sent to be symbolically consumed by a monstrous guardian and to emerge afterward changed. No longer children, now adults, now permitted back into the community with new status. Prop reads Baba Yaga underneath the fairy tale surface as the guardian of exactly that threshold. Not simply the border of a forest, but the border between one stage of life and the next, and between the world of the living and the world of the dead. That reframes everything about the Fence of Bones. It isn't decoration meant to frighten children in the retelling. It's the visible record of everyone who reached that boundary and failed the test the boundary demands. And the test itself is never about physical strength. Vasilisa doesn't fight her way past Baba Yaga. She survives by already knowing, inherited from her mother, from the doll, from the old ways passed down through a female line, the story clearly cares about how you're supposed to behave when you reach the edge of the world. You understand. Speak the right words to the house. Do the impossible work without complaint. Answer honestly when asked. That's the whole test. And getting it wrong is fatal. Here's the thing worth sitting with before we leave Baba Yaga and go looking for her relatives elsewhere in the world. This is an unusually efficient piece of cultural machinery. One figure carries both the boundary and the judgment on whether you're fit to cross it. She is the door and the doorkeeper at once. Most cultures, it turns out, don't build it that way. Most cultures split the job in two. One figure who guards a physical threshold and tests you to pass it, and a separate figure or story entirely about what happens when you fail a test of a different kind. Not intelligence or courage, but decency toward a stranger at your own door. We're going to look at both halves now, taken from two other traditions on the other side of the world from the birch forests Baba Yaga haunts. Because the fact that these ideas show up independently in cultures with no contact with each other is itself the evidence that something real and human is being answered here, not just a good story being copied around. Isolate just the first half of Baba Yaga's job. A guardian stationed at a physical threshold who kills you for answering wrong, and you arrive almost immediately at one of the most famous monsters in the Greek tradition, sitting on a mountain outside the city of Thebes. The Sphinx, in the Greek telling, is not the serene stone figure most people picture from Egypt. The Greek Sphinx is a composite predator, the face of a woman, the breast, feet, and tail of a lion, and the wings of a bird. In the account preserved by the mythographer Apollodorus, her mother is Echidna, and her father is Typhon. The same monstrous parents behind the Hydra and the Chimera, which places her in the same family tree as nearly every other doombringer in the Greek imagination. Hera sends her to Thebes, and she does not simply know a riddle. She is given one, the text says, having learned a riddle from the Muses, which places her closer to divine authority than to a random monster picking a party trick. She takes up her post on Mount Fitchium, just outside the city, and Thebes cannot pass. Here is what makes this a civic catastrophe rather than a single traveler's bad luck. The city already possessed an oracle, a standing prophecy stating plainly that Thebes would be free of the Sphinx the moment someone solved her riddle. So the Thebans didn't simply avoid the mountain. They met about it repeatedly, trying to work the answer out together. And every time they failed, the Sphinx took one of them and killed him. Among the dead, Haemon, the son of Creon, the man ruling the city in the wake of King Laius's death. Losing his own son to her was what finally pushed Creon to make a public proclamation. Solve the riddle. and you receive both the throne and marriage to the wife of Laius. That's not a hero chasing glory. That's a kingdom offering its crown and its widowed queen to whoever can end a crisis that had already cost the ruler his own child. The riddle itself, in the actual ancient wording rather than the version most people know today. What is that which has one voice and yet becomes four-footed and two-footed and three-footed? The familiar phrasing, 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, 3 in the evening, is a later dressing up of this same riddle. The older version doesn't mention time of day at all, just the changing number of legs attached to a single, unnamed thing. Oedipus, a stranger to Thebes, arriving with no idea that he has already killed his own father on the road here, gives the answer, man. As a baby, he crawls on 4 limbs. As an adult, he walks on 2 legs. As an old man, he takes up a staff and walks on what amounts to 3. Correctly answered, in Apollodorus' telling, the Sphinx throws herself from the citadel and dies. Oedipus takes the throne and marries the queen, his own mother, fathering the children whose names carry the rest of his story: Polynices, Eteocles, Ismene, Antigone. Set that last part aside for now. It belongs to a different episode entirely, about what happens when you get past one threshold only to walk directly into a worse one waiting behind it, one you can't see because you don't yet know who you are. What matters here is the shape of the test itself, because it's worth comparing directly to what we just left in the Russian forest. One small, real echo worth noting before we move on. Some ancient sources record a second riddle, sometimes attached to the Sphinx. 2 sisters, one gives birth to the other, and she in turn gives birth to the first. The answer is day and night, different culture, different monster, and somehow the same 2 figures riding through the story. The ones Vasilisa passed on her own road into the forest. Baba Yaga tests character. Are you humble enough to do the work without complaining? Honest enough to answer truthfully when asked where your help came from? Do you know the correct words, inherited from someone who loved you, that let a hostile threshold recognize you as someone who belongs on the other side of it? The Sphinx tests something completely different: pure intellect, a riddle with a fixed, knowable, correct answer with absolutely no partial credit and no appeal to good character. You could be the kindest, most honest traveler who ever approached that rock, and if you don't solve the riddle, you die exactly the same as the cruelest one. 2 cultures with no meaningful contact between the world that told Vasilisa's story and the world that told Oedipus's independently arrived at the same underlying architecture. A monstrous guardian fixed at a threshold everyone eventually has to cross, who kills on failure and permits passage on success. What differs is only what success is measured against: decency in one tradition, intelligence in the other. That's worth pausing on because it tells you something about what these stories are actually doing. They're not simply reusing a scary monster template because it's dramatically convenient. Every culture that builds one of these figures is making an argument about what actually qualifies a person to survive contact with the unknown. The Slavic tradition's answer is inherited humility and honesty. The Greek tradition's answer, at least in this myth, is cleverness. Different cultures asked the same underlying question. What do you need to be allowed past the edge of the world you understand? And gave different answers, each one a small window into what that culture actually valued in a person. We're about to look at a third tradition that isolates the other half of Baba Yaga's dual role entirely. Not a fixed monster testing you at a wall, but an ordinary-looking stranger at your own front door, testing something closer to home than intellect or inherited ritual knowledge. Whether you'll treat a person you don't recognize with basic decency when nothing is forcing you to. No fence of bones this time. No fixed monster on a mountain outside the city gate. Just two old strangers walking through the hill country of Phrygia in the region the Greeks and later the Romans knew as Asia Minor, knocking on doors. The Roman poet Ovid tells this story in his Metamorphoses, though it's worth knowing he doesn't tell it directly. In the poem, it's a character named Lilex who tells it to a skeptical audience that includes a man openly scornful of the idea that gods could have this kind of power. Lilex insists he's seen the proof himself. Two trees, an oak and a lime, still standing side by side on a low hill with a wall built around them to keep them safe. Long before those trees existed, he says, Jupiter and Mercury, Zeus and Hermes in Greek, came down to Earth disguised as two tired old travelers with no mark of divinity on them anywhere. 1,000 houses in that district turned them away. Every single door was bolted against them, every door except one. The last house they try belongs to Baucis and Philemon, an elderly married couple, and by every measure the poorest people in the district. A cottage roofed in reeds and marsh straw, nothing resembling comfort to spare. They take the strangers in without hesitation. Baucis stirs yesterday's embers back to life with her own breath, feeds the fire with bark and dry twigs, and puts on a rusty side of bacon, cutting off only a small, carefully hoarded piece. Philemon gathers vegetables from his own garden. They set a table with one short leg, wedge it level with a broken piece of pottery, and cover it with olives, pickled cornelian cherries, radishes, curdled milk, eggs turned gently in the embers. Then a second course of nuts, dried figs, wrinkled dates, plums, apples, and grapes, with a honeycomb tucked almost out of sight in the middle. Wine is served in cheap clay cups lined with beeswax. It is, by every measure, a poor family's best effort at a proper welcome. Then something happens that tells the couple exactly who's sitting at their table. The wine bowl empties and refills itself on its own over and over. Baucis and Philemon are frightened rather than delighted. They immediately raise their hands and beg forgiveness for the poor state of the meal, having realized all at once exactly what they're hosting. Their instinct isn't to panic, it's to try to do more. They chase down the one goose they own, described in the poem as the guardian of their own small home, meaning to kill it for their guests. The gods stop them before they can. That's not the test. The test was already passed before either of them knew who was sitting at their table. What follows is judgment delivered on the whole district at once. The gods lead the old couple up the nearest mountain, and from there, Baucis and Philemon look back to see everything below them swallowed by a marsh. Every house that turned the disguised gods away, gone. Only their own small cottage still stands, and as they watch, it changes in front of them. The wooden frame becomes marble columns, the reed thatch turns to gold, the doorway fills with carved detail. Offered anything they want in exchange for their hospitality, the couple doesn't ask for wealth. Philemon speaks for both of them. Let us tend this temple as its priests, and since we've lived so many years in harmony, let the same hour take us both so that neither of us ever has to bury the other or see the other's grave. It's granted. Years later, standing together by the temple steps, they notice leaves growing from each other's bodies at the same moment. Bark climbs their legs. They say their farewells to each other while they still have mouths to speak with, and then they are simply two trees grown from what had been two people standing together at the temple door for as long as anyone in that region kept telling the story. Set this directly against what we just left behind on Mount Fixium and against the fence of bones in the Russian forest, and the pattern becomes impossible to miss. This is the same underlying test. You are being evaluated right now by something you cannot yet see clearly, and the stakes are total. But with every external trapping of a threshold stripped away, no fence, no riddle, no mountain guardian announcing herself. Just an ordinary door in an ordinary district, and the entirely unremarkable-looking test of whether you'll treat two tired strangers with basic human decency when there's no visible reward for doing so and no visible punishment for refusing. Except there is a punishment. It arrives disguised as ordinary bad luck, a flood, the kind of disaster that could plausibly hit any district in any unlucky year. Until the story pulls back the curtain and reveals that everyone nearby was, without knowing it, being tested at once, and every door had already rendered its verdict before the water ever rose. This idea that hospitality toward a stranger is not simply good manners, but a sacred obligation with real supernatural stakes attached to it, wasn't a private literary flourish of Ovid's. It sat at the center of how the Greeks actually understood their obligations to strangers. They called it xenia, and it was protected in Greek religious belief by Zeus himself in his aspect as Zeus Xenios, guardian of guests. The scholar Walter Burkert, in his standard reference work, Greek Religion, writes that Zeus has a special concern for the relations which bind strangers to one another, and gives his own example of the stakes involved. He ties the entire Trojan War back to this same law, noting that Zeus resolved to destroy Troy specifically because Paris had violated the laws of hospitality. Different myth, same underlying warning Baucis and Philemon's neighbors failed to heed. You cannot always tell who is standing at your door, so the law had to apply to everyone, every time, without exception. That's the same logic, wearing different clothes, as the words Vasilisa had to speak to a hostile house before it would let her in. Both traditions are encoding an identical warning. The stranger at your threshold, the traveler you can't yet categorize, might be exactly what they appear to be, or might be something that will judge you entirely by how you behaved before you knew who was watching. 3 traditions: a Russian hut on chicken legs, a Greek monster on a rock, an ordinary door in a Phrygian village. No historical contact between the cultures that produced them, and in every single case, the same underlying architecture. A threshold, a test administered by something you cannot fully see or categorize, and a total stakes riding on whether you pass. That's not coincidence, and it isn't simply that fear makes for good storytelling everywhere. There's a real anthropological explanation for why cultures keep building this exact shape of story, and it comes from the study of ritual itself, not from the study of folklore. In 1909, a French anthropologist named Arnold van Gennep published a book called The Rites of Passage, based on comparing ceremonies from cultures across the world. Birth rituals, coming-of-age ceremonies, weddings, funerals, looking for what they had in common underneath their surface differences. What Van Gennep found was a repeating 3-part structure in nearly every major life transition any culture ritualizes. First, separation. The person is symbolically removed from their old status, often physically. Taken from the village, isolated, stripped of the markers of their previous identity. Second, what Van Gennep called the liminal stage, from the Latin limen, meaning threshold. A suspended in-between state where the person is neither their old self nor their new self, existing in a kind of social nowhere. And third, incorporation. The person is brought back into the community, now recognized in their new status. Adult instead of child, married instead of single, initiated instead of outsider. Half a century later, the anthropologist Victor Turner picked up that middle stage, the liminal, and argued it deserved far more attention than it had been getting because it's the stage where a society's real anxieties concentrate. In his book, The Ritual Process, in a chapter titled Liminality and Communitas, Turner writes it directly. Liminal entities are neither here nor there. They are betwixt and between the positions assigned and arrayed by law, custom, convention, and ceremonial. People passing through that stage he goes on, get treated by the surrounding culture as symbolically dead, invisible, or dangerous, stripped of ordinary status, sometimes literally dressed as monsters, precisely because they no longer fit any category the society knows how to process. That in-between state, Turner argued, is where cultures locate danger, transformation, and the sacred all at once, because a person who doesn't fit any existing category is genuinely destabilizing to a social order that depends on everyone fitting somewhere. Turner didn't build this idea from theory alone. He'd watched it happen. His fieldwork was among the Ndembu people in what's now Zambia, and one of his central examples has nothing to do with myth at all. It's the actual installation ritual for a new chief, the Kanongesha. Before a chief-elect can be publicly installed, he's taken about a mile from the capital to a small shelter of leaves the Ndembu call the Kafu, a word that comes directly from their term for to die. There, dressed in nothing but a ragged waistcloth, treated as though he were sick or infirm, he undergoes a rite called Kumukindila, literally, the reviling of the chief-elect. A ritual official cuts his arm, then delivers a harangue calling him selfish and bad-tempered, a man who has to be told out loud in front of his own people to stop being unjust and start sharing what he has. After that, anyone in the community who feels wronged by him is permitted to step forward and revile him to his face in as much detail as they want, while he sits in silence with his head down. What Turner calls the pattern of all patience. Turner's own informants told him the chief-elect in that moment is treated just like a slave the night before he succeeds. Only after this, only after the most powerful man in the community has been humiliated and stripped of every marker of the status he's about to receive. Does the installation itself take place? That's not a myth. That's a ritual Turner personally documented as living, practiced culture in the 20th century, and it carries the exact same shape as everything we've spent the last hour inside. Before a culture will let you cross into a new status, something has to test whether you can survive being reduced to nothing first. Now, put that framework directly next to the 3 stories we've just spent an hour inside. Vasilisa, sent into the forest, is a person in the liminal stage exactly as Van Gennep defines it. No longer fully a child under her mother's protection. Not yet an adult with a household of her own. Physically removed from the village and suspended at the edge of the world where the ordinary rules stop applying. Baba Yaga is what a culture builds to occupy that liminal space. A figure who is neither straightforwardly good nor evil, exactly because the space she guards isn't straightforwardly anything either. Oedipus, arriving at Thebes as a stranger with no fixed place yet in that city's social order, is liminal in a more literal, structural sense. A traveler between one city and the next, categorized as neither citizen nor enemy. And the Sphinx is what stands at that exact seam in the map, refusing to let anyone resolve their in-between status until they prove, through the riddle, that they belong on the far side. And every traveler who reaches a door in Ovid's Phrygian village is liminal in the oldest sense the word carries in ordinary experience. Not yet a guest, not simply a stranger to be ignored. Existing in that suspended, ambiguous status until the household on the other side of the door decides, through their own action, what this person is going to be to them. Every one of these figures, the ambiguous witch, the riddling monster, the disguised god, exists because the liminal state itself demands a guardian, not because storytellers across unconnected cultures happened to enjoy the same narrative device, but because the anxiety is genuinely universal. Transitions are dangerous. The in-between is where things go wrong, and a culture that wants to survive its own transitions needs some way to dramatize what correct behavior at the threshold actually looks like. so its people know how to act when they find themselves standing at one. That is what these stories are actually for. Not entertainment first, though they are entertaining. They are instructions disguised as monsters. Back to the fence of bones then, because we left someone standing in front of it, and the real story doesn't end there. Vasilisa carries the lit skull home through a second night of white, then red, then black. Day, sunset, night, passing her again, though now she knows their names. She reaches her stepmother's house to find it, as always, dark. Every light the household lit after she left had gone out on its own, for reasons no one there could explain. She could leave the skull outside, she almost does. But it speaks to her. The story gives it an actual voice coming from somewhere behind those burning eyes, and tells her not to throw it away, but to carry it inside to her stepmother. She does. All through that night, the skull's eyes track the stepmother and the two stepsisters wherever they try to hide in the house, and by morning the three of them are ash. Vasilisa is untouched. The fire never so much as turns toward her. She buries the skull in the ground, gives the household servants their freedom, locks the house and goes to live in town with her old nurse to wait out the time until her father comes home. And here, the story does something worth sitting with. It doesn't end with the deaths of her tormentors. It keeps going into an entirely different kind of test. Not survival this time, but idleness, and what a person does with a life once the danger is past. Vasilisa gets bored waiting. She asks her nurse for the finest flax available and starts to spin, not because she has to, but because she doesn't want to sit still. The thread comes out so fine no weaver in town will touch it, afraid of breaking it. So, one more time, she turns to the doll, and by morning, the weaving is done. Linen so fine it can nearly be pulled through the eye of a needle. Her nurse sells it to the king, who then wants shirts made from it, and again, nobody will touch cloth that fine. So the king sends for the woman who spun it. The nurse explains it wasn't her own work, but a young woman staying in her house made it by way of amusement. The king insists. Then let her make the shirts. The doll does that too, and when the king finally sends a carriage to bring this woman to court and see her for himself, he falls in love before she said a word and marries her shortly after. Her father comes home to find his daughter married to the king. She keeps the doll for the rest of her life, locked away where no one else can see it, out of fear that it might somehow break. That's the whole arc, and it's worth noticing what it actually rewards. Not fighting, not cleverness in the Riddle sense. Obedience without servility, honesty, even when a lie would have been safer, and in that quiet, almost throwaway detail about not asking too many questions. The discipline to know which things are not hers to ask about. Every single test in this story, from the chores to the silence to the weaving nobody else can do, is a version of the same question. Do you know how to behave when you've been given no map for what's expected of you? Vasilisa always does. That, more than beauty, more than luck, is what the story keeps insisting is the actual inheritance her mother left her. Here is the pattern this episode has been building toward across 3 traditions and 2,000 years of storytelling. Every one of us, at some point, reaches a fence we didn't build, guarded by something we can't fully categorize as friend or threat. At exactly the moment we're least equipped to face it. A death, a move, a new stage of life we didn't ask to enter, a stranger at the door who might be nothing or might be everything. Vasilisa's fence is made of bone, and the test doesn't end when the danger does. It keeps going into the much quieter question of what she does with the life she's kept. Oedipus's fence is a riddle with a body count behind it. Baucis and Philemon's fence is nothing more than an unremarkable wooden door, which turns out to be the most dangerous fence of the three because nobody in that flooded village even realized they were standing at a threshold until it was already too late to pass the test. We don't build fences of human bone anymore, not literally. But look honestly at what we do build instead. The unfamiliar city we move to and don't yet know how to navigate. The diagnosis that puts us somewhere between the person we were and whoever we're going to be once we're finished being sick, or finished grieving, or finished whatever this new unwanted chapter turns out to require of us. The stranger who needs something from us and offers nothing we can verify in return. Every culture that has ever told a story, like Vasilisa's or Oedipus's or Baucis and Philemon's, was reaching for the same thing. Some way to say, out loud, to the people listening around the fire, you will reach a threshold like this. More than one, probably. And what waits on the other side of it will judge you by something more specific than luck. Humility in one telling, intelligence in another, basic decency toward whoever happens to be standing in front of you in a third. The fence is real, in other words, even once the bones are gone. Every culture on Earth appears to have understood that independently and built a guardian to stand at it. Not to torment us in the end, but to ask the one question that was always actually being asked. When you reach the edge of what you know, will you know how to behave?